Hello, all, and welcome back to our third pre-session. I'm Carol Hicks, and in this pre-session, we are going to continue focusing on the book by Suzy Pepper Rollins, Learning in the Fast Lane. This session is about vocabulary development and implementing a strategic plan. In this video, we are focusing on challenges affecting vocabulary development. We'll talk about strategic vocabulary development and why it works, and we're going to explore ways that we can implement a strategic vocabulary plan. Remember when you see the icon at the bottom that it's a reminder to take notes in your journal. After reading or listening to the podcast, what do you think about these two questions? How important is math vocabulary in our classes, and how should we teach it? Take some time to reflect on that and jot it down in your journals. Before trying to close the vocabulary gaps for some of our students, we might want to look at why they exist. To do this, we first need to understand why some of our students are not coming to our classrooms knowing the words that they should already know. The second thing we want to focus on is why do some of our learners have difficulty retaining and recalling new vocabulary? From this research, we can see why some students come to our classrooms with limited vocabulary. It shows that vocabulary gaps start early with some children, often depending on their family background, and continues to grow from year to year. As you can see in the research, 3-year-olds from welfare families typically possess just 70% of the vocabulary that children in working class families have, and only 45% of the vocabulary of children in middle class or professional homes. We can also see that there is a connection between poor vocabulary and academic failure. We can see that those who scored in the 50th percentile know 6,000 more words than those who scored in the 25th percentile, which makes it clear that vocabulary has a huge impact on how students do on their standardized tests. We also know that the vocabulary gaps grow year after year, making it just harder and harder for students to catch up because of these gaps. This table gives us a clear idea why students have difficulty retaining and recalling new vocabulary words. Look at the amount of vocabulary words in each subject area that students need to know and understand throughout their academic career. It's easy to see why students who already have vocabulary gaps tend to grow those gaps year after year. From this research, we see that students will learn limited vocabulary from reading alone. That means they'll most likely learn less math vocabulary from the textbooks they read because there's typically less reading and fewer context clues. Additionally, students that have not had strategic vocabulary instruction in their other subject areas will have a more limited incidental vocabulary, which makes it even harder to understand word problems or different things in their math classes. So this leads to even bigger gaps in their understanding. We know that vocabulary is vital to a deep understanding of math content and that we need to use vocabulary strategies that work. Strategic vocabulary development works well with all of our students and is needed especially for those who are language learners or those with learning disabilities. Read through this list of fundamental principles of vocabulary instruction. These are vital to keep in mind as you create and implement a plan for teaching vocabulary in your classroom. Now, as you move on to look at some of the different strategies that you can use in your classroom, keep these 2 steps in mind. You'll need to decide which words need to be taught, and you'll need to determine when to use each of these strategies to teach those words. Read over this slide to review what you've already learned about tip charts. Word art can be a creative and engaging activity for your students, especially those young artists in your classroom. This activity may make your students stretch their thinking and imagination a bit, as well as maybe your own thinking as you're preparing it. But I wonder if you'll be surprised with some of the connections that they make. Here's another great way to practice vocabulary in your classroom. You could play this in an entire class period, or you could spread it over several days. Which One Doesn't Belong is a great starter for your math lesson and engages students in rich mathematical discourse. There's a link to the WODB, or Which One Doesn't Belong website, in the resources and on the January navigation guide for more problems. Instant Etch-a-Sketch is a great activity for all grades. Can you think of what vocabulary tasks you would give? Word Detective is another good activity to promote rich math discourse. Vocabulary Cubes is a fun activity that allows your students to practice vocabulary words in a variety of ways. Vocabulary sorts are engaging activities that can be used in a variety of ways for multiple purposes. So, for your next steps, remember we're not meeting until January, so you'll have some time if you need it to work on your IPLP in December. Also, remember to complete the pre session journal prompts that are on the next slide. Bring your current unit or next unit to our Zoom meetings so we can continue working on our accelerated learning components. And don't forget, invite a coworker. It's so nice to be able to work together on some of the things that you're learning. Hey, if you need anything from us, please check out our website, or you can email Angela or myself with any questions that you might have.